Hey guys, happy Saturday afternoon. So much has happened since we spoke yesterday that it's hard to know how I could even think of going even one day without speaking with you. I have this feeling that as we approach the election, we're going to have to do not just Weekend Jen on Saturday, my friends, but we are going to have to do a Sunday check in. It's just the way it is. I don't make the rules. I think that's just how things are going right now. I have some new lights here, and I'm hoping that they work better than the others, so that we don't have as much glitching. Okay, let's get into it. Today we are going to ask: will Judge Juan Merchan sentence Donald Trump to jail? The reason why I am asking this question right now is because, as you know, in May, a jury of his peers unanimously, because that's what's required, convicted Donald, found him guilty on 34 felony counts for falsifying business records in New York. We use the shorthand, we call that the hush money case. The real question is, will the judge lock him up? Because Donald has reached a dead end in terms of trying to postpone the sentencing. The sentencing for Donald Trump in the hush money case, which we more accurately and specifically refer to the jury verdict, where he was found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records, which is a Class E felony in New York. More on that. The sentencing is scheduled for September 18th, and Donald made a last-ditch effort to try to change that. He tried to yesterday postpone that and messed it up. Furthermore, he's had equally bad luck in some of his other cases. But let's focus on that first. Now, I do have some fun stuff to talk about, but let's get into the legal nitty gritty to start out with, and then I'll reward you with some shenanigans, ridiculous activity, offensive behavior, and of course, crazy town. Are you with me? Guys, are you with me? Are you ready to dig into why Donald Trump may actually be sentenced to some kind of jail time, or at least to some kind of incarceration or home confinement? Let's do this. Now, as you remember, the so-called hush money case involved Donald Trump violating a New York statute that makes it a felony if you do it with essentially a corrupt intent, and I'll explain. If you falsify your business records, it is, and you are a person who lives in New York, or this activity takes place in part in New York, or you have a New York business, then you can be, and he was, found guilty of falsifying business records. Now, this is normally a misdemeanor, which also can come with jail time, by the way, but it was elevated to a felony because the jury found that Donald Trump falsified his business records in order to, or with the intent to, commit another crime, namely trying to interfere in the 2016 election. Okay, this goes back to 2016. Yes, isn't it shocking that it takes so long for justice to be served, if it will be at all? But justice, like revenge, in this situation may be a dish best served cold, because Donald Trump probably has the chills knowing that there is no way for him or his lawyers, most likely, to postpone the sentencing hearing that is coming up on the 18th. Now, let's tell you what he tried to do and what he's tried to do in the past, and how his lawyers messed up. But their messing up is not why the judge ruled the way he did. Okay, Donald Trump's attorneys filed a notice of removal. What this means is they went into a federal court at the Southern District of New York, to a trial judge there, and said, "Hi, Judge, we would like to remove this case from the state court in New York because we believe we have the right to do so under federal law. And to be clear with you, this is something Donald Trump's lawyers tried to do earlier. And that is the main problem here. Okay. Earlier in this case, many months ago before the sentencing, his lawyers tried to have his case removed to federal court. And you do sometimes have the right to remove a state claim into federal court, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. And the argument that they have made previously is that things like the judge is biased and therefore it should be removed. But the main reason has to do with it being Donald Trump's lawyers say that this is a federal case because this involves him acting within the course of his employment, that these were official duties as president. Now, keep in mind that he was not president at the time that he engaged in the conspiracy, the plan to pay off Stormy Daniels so it would not get out, but that the business record falsification started to take place, of course, after he was elected and then once he was in office, and he signed many checks and records. Now, remember, the falsification was that instead of accurately reporting that he was paying back Michael Cohen, that he was reimbursing Michael Cohen for these payments he made to Stormy Daniels, instead, Donald Trump cooked up a scheme with his accounting team to make it look like this was part of a monthly retainer. They disguised it, hence business falsification in New York, the felony we spoke of. And this was not part of his official conduct. Now, let's get back to the attempt at the end of this week, business week, that Donald Trump's lawyers made to have it removed to federal court. So the way it works is you have one notice of removal as of right. So previously, when they filed that notice before the trial, they burned through that permissive right, that permissive filing. So the judge ruled on the merits, go away. You lose. Okay, that was done. Now, however, this past week, when Donald's lawyers filed for a notice of removal, it was a second bite at the apple. It's what you would call an amended notice of removal. And you're not allowed to just go into federal court a second time or a third time. You need either what's called leave of the court. He needed Judge Juan Merchan to say, cool, go ahead and do it. Or he needed Alvin Bragg's office to give permission. You don't just keep going after removal over and over again. So here's where the lawyers messed up. Donald's lawyers, they didn't ask for permission first. Now, they wouldn't have gotten it, first of all, but okay. And secondly, they filed it as a notice of removal, not an amended one. So the federal court judge said, I am rejecting your attempts to remove the case. And the judge did it purely on procedural grounds, not on the merits. And sure, they could try again, but it would still fail on procedural grounds. So just to be clear, even if Donald Trump's lawyers had filed the proper form with the federal court, this case would have been thrown out procedurally, and there is no right of appeal. That's it. This is the end of trying to get this case into federal court to postpone the sentencing. Now, keep in mind, you may remember that there were some, I think it was the Attorney General of Missouri and some other similar AGs, state AGs, who tried to get the Supreme Court to take the case and postpone the sentencing, and they failed. Okay. So what it's looking like, just to be clear, is Donald Trump is facing the music, and it's not a song that he wants to hear. It's kind of like the chant that he directed his followers to shout about Hillary Clinton. The chant is lock him up. I ask it as a question because I'm not someone who chants like that, because I believe in due process. And so I'm asking you the question. if the sentencing indeed happens, which it looks like it's on track for September 18th, what are the prospects for some kind of sentencing? And so I want to bring to you some of the receipts to make this clear. Now, the statute in question, the falsifying business records statute, allows for a felony for anywhere between, if you're going to give a sentence of incarceration, between 1 to 4 years. There is no obligation for incarceration. You can have incarceration or community service or a fine or some combination of the above. Plus, incarceration doesn't have to look like staying in prison. It could be some kind of home confinement. It could be come on the weekends or one day a week for a month. I have seen that. And so let me explain it to you. As you probably have seen, a fabulous lawyer who worked at one time in the Obama White House, Norm Eisen, who also writes for Just Security and has worked for CREW, or on the board of CREW, which is I guess I want to say coalition, but it's the CREW's, the Organization for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. And Norm Eisen has done a really good job. He did this a while ago. Sorry, it's Citizens for Responsibility Ethics in Washington. So Norm Eisen did a nice piece for Just Security a while ago, and I'm going to pull up the salient parts for you. Okay, so what we're looking at here is what are the prospects of someone like Donald Trump, who was found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records, Class E felony in New York, to get incarceration. So this particular pie chart, and it's one of the helpful ones in here, it's graphic 2. This shows New York State convictions by most severe sentence type. And this is data for defendants convicted on Class E felonies. So falsifying business records is a type of Class E felony. Okay, so we're starting kind of broad, all Class E felonies. And this is from November 2020 to May of 2024. For all of Class E felonies, 67% of the time, a defendant would get some kind of incarceration. However, my friends, that does not mean Donald Trump will be locked up. Let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit harder for you to see, and I'm going to walk through it. I think you're going to enjoy this quite a bit. So what you're looking at here is an excerpt, and I have, I think, just 2 of these or 3 of these, an excerpt from a chart that Norm and his team also included in that article in Just Security. And what this chart shows are people who were convicted of falsifying business records who also happened to get sentences and what the sentences looked like. Now, I selected from this chart those people who had similar types of conduct where it was pretty much a pure business falsification situation instead of someone else who had other more combination of like tax fraud or so on. So, right, if we look at this, what you can see is there was a defendant who had his verdict. His verdict came down in January of 2016. So right before Donald Trump took office, January 15th a year before Donald Trump took office. And so David and Edelhart, he was charged with 1 count of falsifying business records. The documents I looked at indicated he was likely a first-time offender. He was sentenced to 2 days a week of incarceration for a year. And what happened to him is his sentence would commence on Mondays at 6 p.m. and would continue until Wednesdays at 9 a.m. And then later he was resentenced. Okay, so this particular case involves some bribery, however. But of course, that's what made it a first-degree felony. Donald Trump's conviction involved falsifying business records for purposes of interfering with a U.S. presidential election. That's pretty flippin' serious. Okay, let's look at another one of these. This is Richard Braga. Richard Braga was sentenced in December of 2018. And similar to Donald Trump, he had several falsifying business records counts for which he was found guilty. This guy, Braga, was found guilty of 10 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. He had no prior convictions. We're trying to do apples to apples here. So what happened? Braga was sentenced to 1 year of incarceration. And this involved, listen to this, you guys. This is just like Donald Trump. I want to read this to you. It's pretty interesting. Between April and August of 2013, Richard Braga used 10 what's called straw donors, so someone pretending they were donating. So he gave them money. This is to evade campaign contribution limits. This included his family and employees of his company. And at the end of the day, he ended up pleading guilty to 1 count of falsifying business records in the first degree. And then he was sentenced to 1 year of incarceration to run concurrently with a different sentence, a separate sentence of bribery. Okay, so the deal is, this was also going on. There had been no prior convictions at the time of his offense, but keep in mind that he had a record at the time he was sentenced. But also, this guy got a year incarceration. It was only 10 counts that he was charged with, but he pled guilty to just 1, right? Okay. So that is what I got for you on that. Incarceration is on the table. As I've always said, I find it unlikely that a judge would put Donald Trump in a prison facility, but he might. He might. At the very least, I would be shocked, or should I say extremely disappointed, if he doesn't at least get some kind of confinement where he has to wear an electronic bracelet and they let him campaign, but he doesn't get to do things like play golf or anything unrelated to the campaigning. Now, why do I say that? Because I think that when he's campaigning, he's not likely either a flight risk, or the other thing to point out, though, is a judge could suspend the sentence till after the campaign, or the worst parts of it. I have no idea, but I am just pointing out to you that is well within the judge's ambit to sentence him to some form of incarceration. Okay, that's what I got for you just on that one case. Of course, in addition to Donald Trump having no way out from getting sentenced to some kind of criminal penalty on the 18th of September, he is also struggling right now with a different case because, friends, the criminal case involving his interference in the 2020 election 4 years later is back on. It was on hold, but Judge Chutkan asked for the parties to submit to her by the end of the month, which they did yesterday, a memo, a joint memo talking about what the plan and the scheduling should be. And as we talked about here, prior to that, just a couple of days ago, Jack Smith surprised us all by filing a superseding indictment. He had quietly, without any leaks, assembled a new grand jury, and Donald Trump had been re-indicted on the same charges. 10 pages of the indictment were removed, largely because of the references to Donald Trump's role, and let me be more clear, largely because the Jack Smith stripped out of the indictment all of the references to the interchange and the engagement that Donald Trump had with the Department of Justice, including Jeffrey Clark, because Jack Smith believed that the Supreme Court, the recent immunity ruling, would say that it is perfectly fine and a president is immune to weaponizing the Department of Justice in such a way to try to stage a coup. So he had to strip that out of the case. Okay, so where are we with this? Here's the bottom line. The bottom line, I think you want to know this, is that if Judge Chutkan follows the recommendation put forward by Donald's lawyers in the joint memo that was filed last night, the trial in the federal case involving interfering in the 2020 election will not take place until late 2025 at the earliest. Again, if she follows the recommendation the time frame set forth by Donald's lawyers, there is no way this trial will happen this year, and it will most likely not happen until late 2025. Okay. Now you may say, why, Jen, are you mentioning the time frame Donald Trump's lawyers offered? What time frame did Jack Smith offer? And the answer to that question is none. I am not telling you the time frame Jack Smith offered or suggested because he offered none. He said it's up to the judge to run her own case. So let's take a look at what I am talking about in the joint filing. Okay, I am zeroing in here on the chart, the last lines of the chart that are contained in the joint scheduling memo. And as you can see, we have week of January 27th. Donald Trump's lawyers are still calling for a non-evidentiary hearing about motions to dismiss and motions to compel. And spring through fall 2025 says additional proceedings if necessary. Folks, on his schedule, we haven't even had discovery, right? This schedule is all about a variety of pretrial motions designed to delay and try to get the case dismissed. Included on the list was them trying to do what had been done in South Florida, which is get the case dismissed on the grounds that Jack Smith was improperly appointed and that the funds allocated to the case were misappropriated and therefore it had to be dismissed. And there's a series of motions that they want to file. Now, although Jack Smith did not specify a date, he argued, why can't these all happen concurrently instead of in series so we can get the show on the road faster? So we're going to have to wait and see what Judge Chutkan comes up with for a schedule. But I will tell you, it won't be. I'm certain that regardless of the schedule, there will not be a trial until 2025. And of course, if Donald Trump wins, there will be no trial at all. Now, and that's just the fact, because we know you're allowed to not only weaponize the Justice Department against your enemies, certainly you can tell the Justice Department not to prosecute you, and there will be no consequences according to the sitting Supreme Court majority. Okay, so here I am showing you the very important piece of the joint memo. This is the part written. So even though it's called a joint memo, doesn't mean that each section, every word is agreed upon by both sides. This is a part of the memo Jack Smith put forward. Although Jack Smith did not propose any kind of time frame, what he did say is, let's get the show on the road. What he wants to do is file an opening brief as soon as possible. So a brief is essentially, you've seen these before. It's like a legal argument, right? And it says it will be it's kind of like when you wrote a paper in college where you take a position and you try to support it with the evidence. So he wants to file an opening brief that will explain why the immunity set forth in Trump, meaning the Supreme Court case that we just spoke about, that came down at the very last minute of the Supreme Court's season this year. I shouldn't I call it season as if it's a television show for their docket, because it sure feels like they think they are stars in their own drama. They're saying that the opening brief will explain why the immunity set forth in that Supreme Court case does not apply to the category of allegations in the superseding indictment or additional unpled categories of evidence that the government intends to introduce and will proffer in brief. Okay, let me translate that into human speak. There's two things that Jack Smith wants to do. First, he wants to provide, and he's probably already written a memo explaining to the judge why and how he carefully pruned the old initial indictment and created a new superseding indictment, evidence presented before this new grand jury, and how everything in it falls into the category of non or unofficial conduct, that none of the conduct described is part of a president's official duties or even at the periphery of it. Okay, fine. But in addition, what Jack Smith wants to also share, and I don't know if this will be public, but I presume Donald's team will see it, of course, he wants to share additional evidence that was not put in the indictment, but that they plan to present at trial. That way, Judge Chutkan can look at that and make rulings right now about whether it passes muster. And then, of course, Donald Trump's lawyers will say, no, this can't be included. And that will give opportunities for appeal so that before the trial takes place, we all know that we're on the right page, because the Supreme Court said that the Judge Chutkan had to engage in some fact-finding, had to look at evidence herself to decide whether what Donald Trump is being tried for is part of his official conduct or his unofficial conduct. Any official conduct can't even come in as evidence. Okay, so that is what's going on. And remember, Jack Smith provided no time frame, whereas Donald Trump's lawyers would drag this thing out deep into 2025 by the time you would get into discovery. I have no idea what the judge is going to do. Okay, so that's Donald Trump and his legal woes. I hope you have marked your calendar for September 18th, and I hope you've also still marked your calendar for September 10th, which is when the first debate hosted by ABC will be held, and that will be under similar rules as the first debate, or I should say the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, although Kamala Harris tried to get the rules changed so that Donald Trump's mic would not be silenced in between when he would be speaking. That was to no avail. There will be no audience, but I'm very excited. I think you should mark your calendar. So September 10th is the first debate. September 18th is the sentencing hearing. And then on September 20th, my friends, early in-person voting begins in Minnesota and Virginia. I believe I have those two states correct. I need you to right now, after you finish watching YouTube, or right now make a note that you should check to make sure you are still registered to vote. And also ask a friend or family member to do that. You can do that online via the U.S. government website, or just go to your local Secretary of State's website and find out for yourself. Also find out where you should be voting. And if you want to vote early, in person, or you want to vote by mail-in ballot, this is probably time to get your plan in place. Okay, so what else is going on? Okay, it is time to talk about JD Vance again. So I got a few things, and then we're going to get to Crazy Town. I'm going to do some JD Vance, and then we're going to do a little bit of Crazy Town. So here's JD Vance. This is something unearthed by some reporters, showing that JD Vance has been obsessed for ages about women's reproductive organs and people who don't have children. And I think I'm beginning to understand, and I'm merely an armchair psychologist, but I did read his book Hillbilly Elegy years ago. And it sounds like he had an incredibly traumatic childhood. And it's very difficult to be a child whose mother was addicted and violent and had lots of different men coming in the home, and he didn't have a sense of stability outside of his relationship with his grandmother. And it seems to me like it would have been a good subject for therapy, as opposed to projecting onto all women in America, apparently the hatred he felt for his mother. Okay, let's listen.
I wouldn't say that I have fully developed views on this, but to me what it is sort of a value system to replace the fact that they're all fundamentally atheist or agnostic. They have no real value system. Their only value system is achieve in a very conventional way. And so the idea that somehow they're pursuing racial or gender equity is like the value system that gives their life meaning. Well, of course, they all find that value system leads to misery, leads to unhappiness. And so I think that what happens is, like, whenever you really pursue something, right? Like let's say a doctor gives you a medicine to cure a disease and it doesn't work, right? The patient gets worse. Well, you can conclude one of two things. Either the medicine isn't working, or the patient was so sick that what they need is even more of the medicine that you originally prescribed. And I think the gender inequity stuff is like, we need more of the medicine. Okay, clearly this value set has made me a miserable person who can't have kids because I already, passed the biological period when it was possible. And I live in a 1,200 square foot apartment in New York and I pay $5,000 a month for it. But I'm really better than these other people.
Wait, a couple things. That's so specific. Like he's really specifically hating on single women living in apartments. And is he a therapist? I mean, what is he even talking about? This is so weird. Let's continue.
Going to do is project my racial and gender sensitivities on the rest of them. And the reason that our society is broken is because these people don't think the exact way that I think. Even though the way that I think has made me a miserable person, I just need to make more people think like that. So we're going to teach this in our schools, in our universities, even in our elementary schools, because once everybody agrees with me, then everything will finally come.
Okay, you see what that was? Once again, he is projecting his own weird ideas, because that's really weird, on single women who are teachers living in expensive apartments in New York, who he's convinced just are treating the reality that there is gender and racial discrimination throughout our history, and suggesting that that is some kind of medicine to cure them of their I don't know what. It is really weird, and he is really stuck on this. And I want to play for you then a response that Gwen Walls has offered. Of course, she is the First Lady of Minnesota, and she is a teacher who was once childless herself.
And they're coming for our reproductive freedom too, right? Now, I read that J.D. Vance said he was really disturbed by teachers who don't have biological children. Well, really? Well, for a long time, Tim and I were teachers who struggled with infertility. And we were only able to start a family because of fertility treatments. So this is really personal for me. And I think it is for millions of Americans. We do not take kindly to folks like J.D. Vance telling us when or how to start our families.
That's right.
So let me use my teacher voice. English teachers, you know what these babies are for. Okay, here's my Mr. Vance. How about you mind your own business? Okay, you don't have to put your glasses on, but try with me in your teacher voice. Mr. Vance, how about you mind your own business?
Exactly. He's got a lot of his own business to mind. And before we get to Crazy Town, I want to share with you something I find really important, because all of this comes back to controlling women's bodies. It is fundamental, for whatever reason, to their ideology. And I'm not going to overanalyze it. I'm just going to, because I've gone through this before with you, I just want to play you the latest. Now, Donald Trump is trying to have it both ways by lying about his position on abortion and lying about his position on IVF. But we know both what he has said and what he will do. And as for the Republican Party, we know, including J.D. Vance, how they voted on IVF. So I want to play for you Donald Trump discussing what's going on in Florida, where he still votes because he has not been sentenced yet. If he is sentenced, he may not be able to vote in Florida in the election. So that should be interesting. But anyway, he was asked about one of the propositions on the Florida ballot that would attempt to protect pregnancy.
Yes or no on Amendment 4 in Florida?
So I think 6 weeks, you need more time than 6 weeks. I've disagreed with that right from the early primaries. When I heard about it, I disagreed with it. At the same time, the Democrats are radical because the 9 months is just a ridiculous situation where you can do an abortion in the 9th month. And, you know, some of the states like Minnesota and other states have it where you could actually execute the baby.
So this
after birth.
isn't true at all?
All of that stuff is unacceptable. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
Okay. He is voting no. So whatever he tries to say that he believes, that he says he'll protect women's bodies, he claims he'll be, reproductive freedom, he'll be the best president for women. He's told you what he'll do. What he says is less important than how he'll vote. And I think that you need to see this. This is something that also Donald Trump has said that's really creepy. There's an expression, you've heard it, I have your back. It means that, you know, I'll stand up for you. Especially when you're not in the room. I'm there for you when you're down and out. And so this is some lovely, I don't know if it's a commercial, if it's more like a mashup that someone made, taking what Donald said. And you should watch this. Don't just walk away from your phone as you're listening to this, because watching this will show you exactly what's going on. We'll talk on the other side.
Always has your best interests and has your back. I have your back, I have your heart, and I have every other part of your body. And I have every other part of your body. And I have every other part of your body. And I have every other part of your body. And I have every other part of your body. And I have every other part of your body. And I have every other part of your body. And I have every other part of your body.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy. It's not that he's slipping up when he says that. He has a real authoritarian bent. He's very dangerous. Now, toward that end, something really, really more challenging. I wanna show you before we get to Crazy Town. You may know one of these podcasters, Tim Pool, who I thought was a good guy back in the Occupy Wall Street days, but he's totally insane now. And this is something that I believe has been scrubbed from YouTube now. But it's sort of, you know, gung-ho, Project 2025, full-on authoritarianism, dictator, not just on the first day, but every single day. Let's play it.
The reason for that is they've committed crimes.
Oh, wait, let me just start this over.
Should Democrats be in jail? No question. When Donald Trump gets elected, should he start locking them up? No question. Should there be lists of Democrats that need to go to jail? 100%. And the reason for that is they've committed crimes. We need to make sure that when Donald Trump wins, we've got an attorney general, a deputy attorney general, a head of the CIA and the FBI. Kash Patel would be fantastic. We can have attorney general. There's some names floating around. And then they can start having their investigators and the feds issuing subpoenas, pulling up evidence, and with real evidence, bring them to judges for warrants. Then these people can spend three years of their lives fighting tooth and nail for the crime against the government for crimes they committed, and we can prove. Yeah. And the reason why we put them on trial is that we can show the whole world we will uncover what you've done. We will make sure everyone knows, and you will be held accountable for it.
Not just jail, they should get the death penalty. You know, we actually used to have the punishment for treason in this country.
I think you remember Laura Loomer. That was her. Okay, so that's what they're planning, because these folks cannot face the fact that Donald Trump, if you look at his long history, has always been a fraudster and a con artist. And when he's finally being held accountable, they've decided that it must be a political witch hunt, which is clearly insane. Now, one more thing. Oh, this is what we got, guys. So I'm trying to bring the show more to 45 minutes so folks can fit it in on their day. And so let us deal with our absolute crazy town. So Crazy Town is, of course, Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as you know, he engaged in really offensive behavior by deciding to hold a photo op and film a commercial at Arlington Cemetery. And now, when he is facing criticism, my friends, here is what he is saying. I kid you not.
Could your campaign have put out those videos and photos?
Well, we have a lot of people. You know, we have people, TikTok people. You know, we're leading the internet. That was the other thing. We're so far above her on the internet.
But on that hallowed ground, should they have put out the images of those?
I don't know what the rules and regulations are. I don't know who did it.
And it could have been them. It could have been the parents. It could have been somebody.
It was your campaign's TikTok, though, that put out the
I
video.
really don't know anything about it. All I do is I stood there and I said, if you'd like to have a picture, we can have a picture. If somebody did it, this was a setup by the people in the administration that, oh, Trump is coming to Arlington. That looks so bad for us.
What kind of monster blames the families when he knows damn well that it is his team and his staff, and they put it up on his TikTok account? And when he was first asked, he was boasting about his numbers on social media. So friends, that's what I got for you. He's absolutely crazy, but we have one good thing to remember. September 18th, mark your calendar. I know there won't be cameras in the courtroom, but I will be here. Or if we have an emergency nerds, I'll be over on Mary Trump Media with the team, breaking that down and talking about what the next steps are, whether the sentence is suspended, if I'm surprised at how lenient it is, if I'm surprised by how strong it is. We will be talking about that on the 18th. But for now, have a lovely Saturday. I will see you on Monday morning. Even though it is Labor Day, I still plan to labor. I will see you on Monday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern, right here on Morning Jen.